Finding new medicines to cure disease and relieve suffering benefits mankind. People who volunteer for clinical trials are helping to advance medicine, and everyone involved in clinical research has a solemn obligation to protect their safety and well-being. The principles we look to safeguard research volunteers go back as far as ancient times. Hippocrates gave us the first principle of ethical medicine: first, do no harm. There are 4 principles of critical importance for the conduct of ethical research. The first is informed consent. Volunteers must understand the risks and freely consent to participate. Second, the study must be done by qualified researchers and follow an appropriate research design. Third, the potential benefits must outweigh the risks. And finally, volunteers must be free to end their participation in a study at any point without penalty.
If a patient calls in and they're interested in the clinical trial or their doctors refer them, we bring them into the office. We have a pre-screened consent form that has been approved by one of the IRBs, Institutional Review Boards. So it allows us to gather any health information on the patient and to talk to the patient about their illness and whether or not they would be interested in a clinical trial.
Informed consent is really an ongoing process, and it begins with information exchange and the ability for a potential research subject to ask difficult questions and for the investigator to answer those questions in a completely truthful manner about what is involved in a patient's participation in a study, what will be expected in terms of that participation.
We're also very aware of communication with the patient. They have our phone number available to them all the time, and we do assessments along the way, both lab assessments as well as clinical assessments for safety issues. So it's a continuous process, and we on the front end, we like to inform their primary care doctors about their participation in the study, and on the back end, we always refer them back to their primary care doctors, or if they don't have that point of contact, we set it up for them so that there's some continuity.
The consent process is really key to a patient's participation in the trial, because we want to make sure that the patient coming in is fully informed about the trial that's going to take place. Volunteering to participate in a clinical trial is really a big step, and a patient is committing to helping to advance medicine by participating in a trial. So we want to make sure that they know exactly what it is that they're doing. So oftentimes one of my nurses will sit down with the patient. They'll go through the consent form, pretty much word for word through the consent, answer any questions that the patient may have, and then oftentimes they'll get myself or one of the other doctors in the office to make sure that the patient doesn't have any other additional questions and that they understood what it is that the consent form said. The patient then signs the consent form, and the staff member that's conducting the informed consent also signs the informed consent form. And then before the patient leaves the office, they get a copy of the signed informed consent. Additionally, what I like to do is to talk with the patient at each visit and make sure that they're still willing to continue on with the trial. Because consent, we talk about signing the informed consent, but that's not all that there is to a clinical trial. It's really a process that should be ongoing.
It's the ethical principles that are, if you adhere to the notion that the interests of the research subject transcend all other interests, right? You'll always do the right thing if you adhere to that principle.